So it looks like he'll be in the squad. And alongside Lewandowski, he could be a bit of a star, and he could be the one who takes a bit of the goal-scoring pressure off of Lewandowski as well. But they were probably the favourites. But that whole siege mentality thing and the whole atmosphere in Poland, it sort of spurred them on. And I think they fully deserve the qualification over that game. But since then, it's been not fantastic.
Hello and welcome to another edition of the World Cup Predictor. Today we'll be talking about Poland, and for a certain generation of Polish fans, and more commonly, I suppose, football fans, they'll reminisce about the 70s and 80s team. But there is a new generation that is craving the 70s and 80s squad, especially with big names like Robert Lewandowski. So there's high hopes for that to be repeated at this World Cup, but can they do it? So to talk to me about this and more, I'm delighted to say that I'm joined by a good friend, someone that is also an author of the book Partition to Solidarity. He also contributes for Piłka UK. So I'll introduce you to Ryan Hubbard. So Ryan, thank you for the privilege of going through this Polish team. But before we start, how are you doing?
I'm all good. I'm all looking forward to the World Cup, which, it's a bit of a surprise with it being this time of year. But I suppose I can't wait for it to get started and watch some football over the Christmas break, or heading into it, rather.
Definitely. So we might as well get started and talk about this Polish side. And let's start by the obvious and talk about how this team got to Qatar, because it's been one of those that's been quite eventful in terms of the qualification campaign. We've had two managers in charge of the Polish squad, but also we have a world war should I say, with Ukraine that kind of contributed to the events of Poland qualifying for Qatar. So, talk to us about how this kind of journey began.
Okay, so it was quite a long time ago now, back in the start of 2021, when Poland got into their qualification cycle. In quite a reasonably tough group with England, Hungary and Albania. Obviously, the likes of Andorra and San Marino, the group whipping boys, shall we say. But if on the face of it, 6 wins from that group was quite decent. But when you consider they were all against the likes of Albania, San Marino, and Andorra, it wasn't really particularly convincing. Obviously, they had to go through the playoffs. And that's when it all went a bit strange for Poland. The coach, Paulo Sousa, decided to just up sticks and head to Brazil, took the job at Flamengo and left Poland ahead of the playoffs without a coach and just in a bit of a quandary where to go. It was a bit of a protracted selection process for the new coach. A lot of big names lined up, and in the end, the PZPN decided to go for Czeslaw Michniewicz, who only a few months before had been sacked from Legia Warsaw from leading the champions to the bottom of the extra class table. Not a lot really was expected from that. Obviously, as you mentioned, the war in Ukraine kicked off. Poland's playoff opponents were Russia. And I suppose in one way, Poland led the way in the whole sporting boycott against Russia and took a noble stand there. And it was the game against Sweden, which effectively was Michniewicz's first competitive match in charge of Poland. And that whole siege mentality sort of thing from Poles in general to the situation and to Sousa's departure, I think that sort of was a positive for Poland in that respect, because they probably weren't favourites against Sweden. You probably argue Sweden were. I'm not entirely sure if they were ranked higher at the time or if there was a lot in it, but they were probably the favourites. But that whole siege mentality thing and the whole atmosphere in Poland, it sort of spurred them on. And I think they fully deserve the qualification over that game. But since then, it's been not fantastic. Nations League in particular, drawn in a very tough group in the Nations League. Belgium, Netherlands, and Wales. Obviously, Belgium and Netherlands by far the strongest teams in that group.
Yeah.
And Poland didn't really stand a chance. But the Nations League games were Michniewicz's first real chance to have any sort of experimentation with his squad. It was his brand new squad. His first game was ensuring qualification, play your strongest 11 that you know, and that was the first chance. So we saw a lot of. I think there were 39 players called up to that Summer Nations League squad in total, and there was a lot of experimentation. I think completely different 11s for each of the 3 games in June against Belgium, Netherlands, and Wales. Sorry, there's 4 games. They played twice against Belgium.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think we're still. I think now we have a bit more of an idea what Michniewicz's Poland looks like. During the summer, it was a bit of a blur, and I think we got those final clues in September's games against Netherlands and Wales. And obviously, it leads us into now where there's only one more game, a friendly against Chile next week, to sort of see where Poland stand. But I think we've got a pretty good idea of where the Poland lineup is now heading into the tournament.
So before I kind of ask you about the style of play that maybe we should expect from Poland, let's talk about the man in charge. So Michniewicz, obviously largely unknown to those outside of Poland, but what do you think kind of stands out about Michniewicz and the style that he tries to implement with this Polish squad?
So Michniewicz is quite a divisive character in Poland. I think we ought to start with this. He has, upon his appointment as the national team coach, there was a lot of controversy that came out, mainly due to his alleged links to corruption in the Polish game. He was coach of Lech Poznan around, we're talking 20 years ago now, and there were some alleged links to corruption, sort of ringleader, and a lot of phone calls, and it must be said that nothing was ever proven and innocent until proven guilty and all of that sort of thing. But there was quite a big furore, and it brought up a lot of links to corruption and match fixing that I suppose a younger generation of Polish fans weren't really aware of, and it's just sort of dragged that whole murky past back into public view. But Michniewicz himself, it's not his first job within the national team setup. He used to be the under-21 national team coach, and that was only a couple of years ago. So some of these players that he's now bringing into the national team are players that he used to pick for the under-21s. The likes of the 2 goalkeepers, Kamil Grabara and Bartłomiej Drągowski. Some of the more younger players coming through, the likes of Jakub Moder, who unfortunately will be out injured for the tournament. Michał Skóraś, who's starting to fight his way into the national team, and looks likely to be selected in the tournament once the squad gets announced. But he started to bring his sort of ethos into the team as well. So the way he lines up, he's sort of playing a three at the back with a couple of wing backs, which can be quite fluid. So when Poland are in attack, it can switch and it can switch to more of a 5 at the back when they're in defence. But the main thing for Poland as well is, and it's the same thing that coach after coach has struggled with, is getting Lewandowski into the mix and getting him firing on all cylinders. As we said, Poland during the qualification campaign, they didn't beat any of the bigger teams in the group, the Hungarys and the Englands, and a lot of that is because Lewandowski isn't scoring goals against those sides. Against the likes of San Marino, Albania, Andorra, he can have a field day. But when you've got defenses who isolate Lewandowski and are very much aware that he perhaps isn't playing with the same caliber of player as he does at club level, or certainly doesn't have that same link-up play and that same team ethos as he does in his club team, it makes it very difficult for the Polish attack to break down those defences.
Definitely. And do you think that's down to maybe a bit of a pressure from Lewandowski himself to kind of guide this team? Because largely to an extent, there is a few youngsters, but there is a kind of feeling potentially that he's the quality that breaks these defenses. So do you think that adds the pressure on him?
I think there is a potential that is the case, but we see it. He's one of the best players in the world.
Yeah.
It's no matter which team he plays for, whether it be Poland, Barcelona, or Bayern before that, he's the key man. He is the star. He is the one that those teams look to when they need a goal. So I don't think it's particularly that on its own, but I think it largely is that he just doesn't have that same link-up play and that same, like I say, the same caliber of player, and just that whole. It's not used to playing with those players. It's once every few months he plays with these players, whereas at club level it's every day. So it's just getting it to gel is partly the problem.
That's it. Let's take a look at some of the players to maybe look at then. So obviously we've identified a few, even through the brief description that you gave around the way we're playing at the moment in terms of Poland. What are the players that maybe fans of other teams should maybe keep an eye out on?
Well, getting Lewandowski into the game is one of the main things, and it's going to rely on those players just behind him to sort of create space, play the good through balls, and sort of take a bit of the pressure off of Lewandowski. Because if those players play well, Lewandowski plays well, and if Lewandowski plays well, then Poland can go on and win games. The likes of Piotr Zielinski, who's having an absolute barnstormer of the season at Napoli. He'll be the sort of player sits behind Lewandowski, tries to be the creative player. Then you've got the likes of Sebastian Szymanski, who's at Feyenoord now. He started off very well in his spell at Feyenoord. He looks to have earned his place in potentially the starting 11 under Michniewicz. So those sort of players behind him. But you've also got Karol Świderski as well, who hopefully will be in the squad. Though I know there was a lot of questions, particularly after the Wales game, when it was asked about is he going to be in the squad, and Michniewicz was a bit coy over it being that his season in the MLS had ended quite a while ago when he was match fit. But he's been back training with his old club Jagiellonia Białystok to try and keep up his fitness. So it looks like he'll be in the squad, and alongside Lewandowski, he could be a bit of a star, and he could be the one who takes a bit of the goal scoring pressure off of Lewandowski as well. He's chipped in quite a few goals. He scored the winner against Wales in the Nations League that kept Poland in the top division. So he could be someone who perhaps Lewandowski will obviously be the star, but he could be the one who perhaps surprises a few people. And
certainly.
One of the other players that I'd like to point to, who I think has been an absolute star since he's started playing for the national team, is Jakub Kiwior. He's the left-sided centre-back, so he plays in the back three alongside a lot more experienced players in Kamil Glik and Jan Bednarek. And to be honest, he's made 4 appearances at this point for the national team, and largely he's looked the most experienced of the lot. He's been absolutely stunning when he's played, and he looks a lot more mature than his age and his experience really suggests.
Yeah, certainly. I was going to say he's had some complimentary words from Lewandowski more recently. And another name, maybe some of our fans of the pod will recognise, is Zalewski, who's obviously the left back at Roma, doing quite well this season, got the Golden Boot Award, I believe, recently. And high hopes for Poland as well on that left-hand side with him in that side. And you've got Matty Cash on the other side, right?
Yeah, Poland's wing-backs are arguably the key to Michniewicz's team. It's as I mentioned earlier, it's that fluidity in between defense and attack, and it is Zalewski and Cash who are likely going to be starting in the tournament, and they do provide that link up between the defense and the attack there. As you said, Zalewski he's been in very good form for Roma, and when he's played for the national team, he's not looked out of place at all considering his age. And obviously, Matty Cash is quite publicised about his story. Obviously, not Polish born, and I think historically there's always been a bit of tension between Poles and players who are not necessarily Polish born. But he seems to have bucked the trend a little bit. You can see that Poles have actually embraced him quite a lot, and it doesn't necessarily seem. I think a lot of it is you look at past players who have perhaps switched their nationality to Poland because of Polish grandparents, such as Ludovic Obraniak, Eugene Polanski, and it always has sort of seemed with those players that the reason they've switched allegiance is because they've got no chance of getting into the national team, into the French or German national team, for example. To Cash, that is sort of the case. It's unlikely he would have got into the national team, into the England national team, that being. But I think his performances have actually shown that, do you know what, if he hadn't have switched nationalities, there would be a chance that he could be in the current England team. Especially given their defensive problems at the moment, their injuries and so forth. So it's nice to have seen Polish fans actually embrace a foreign-born player for the first time, probably since Roger Guerrero, probably.
Yeah, no, certainly I've been won over by Cash's effort, or at least attempt to learn Polish. I think that's warmed a lot of Poles over to him. So let's get to your thoughts on this. So what would make a successful tournament for Poland? Because I've got my own opinions, and I've been obviously trying to trace the internet for other Polish fans' thoughts on this. What do you think would be success for Poland?
You mentioned earlier about this being another sort of golden generation for Poland, and I believe it is probably the third golden generation after the 74 and 82 teams, but it just doesn't have that success to back it up. To be honest, it's unlikely going to match those two teams. It's unlikely that Poland will get to the semi-finals of the World Cup. So we have to be a bit realistic. And unfortunately, that realism is getting out of the group. Michniewicz said it himself a few weeks ago. His aim for the tournament is to still be in Qatar on Barborka, which is Miners' Day, which is on the 4th of December, and St. Nicholas' Day, which is 2 days later, because that means that they've got out of the group. I think for the Polish FA, I think that constitutes a success, because it's always the case when a Poland national team gets to a major tournament, and it's always that the coach's contract is coming to an end after the tournament. And the whole thing over whether it gets renewed is dependent on whether Poland get out of the group. So realistically, that is a success. You look at the potential teams that Poland would play in the next round, and it's France and Denmark, two sides who you really wouldn't fancy Poland beating. Denmark, perhaps, in recent years, Poland have beaten them and had some good games against them, but they've also lost to them in recent years as well. So either of those would be a potential tough ask to beat. So realistically, last 16 is it's not only the target, it's likely going to be the maximum for Poland as well.
I think you're aligned with Wojciech Szczesny. He said it recently in an interview to Johan Giroud, the old Arsenal centre-back, by saying, as long as we get to the next stage and face you lot, then we're all happy, even though he was obviously Swiss himself. But he more referred to French TV in that respect. So, let's wait and see. But Ryan, let's also just do a quick fire in terms of your predictions. Who do you think are going to be the eventual winners of the World Cup?
I think it's potentially between three teams. Three teams I've got in my head are Brazil, Argentina, and perhaps a little more left field given their recent performances in the Nations League, but France.
Yeah, that's going to be interesting. Do you think France can handle the pressure? Because it seems like with France, they're always one of those that boil over and cause havoc.
To me, the French are always a team that could go either way. And it's either they have an absolutely fantastic tournament or they have an absolute terrible tournament. And a lot of it will probably depend on whether they fall out with each other, which obviously we've seen in the past can be the case. So that's why they're my sort of left field pick, but they have a fantastic squad when you look at it. So I know they're missing players through injury, the likes of N'Golo Kante, particularly as a Leicester fan who obviously holds a dear place in my heart. But they have the potential. So if they do hit form and if they manage to maintain healthy relationships with each other, then they're always a good shout.
Beautiful. How about your dark horses for this tournament? Because there's quite a few.
First of all, I'd like to say Poland could be a dark horse. I always like watching the sort of East Asian teams.
Okay.
particular, and this might stem back to the 2002 World Cup, but Japan and South Korea.
Okay.
I've actually got myself a South Korea shirt ahead of this tournament. I love the shirt, but I do love South Korea as well. But out of the two, I'd probably edge and say Japan might be a bit more of a dark horse this time.
Oh, lovely. What about top scorer at the tournament?
Always a tough one to predict, and again, I'd love to say Lewandowski, but given his goal scoring records at major tournaments, it's probably not the safest bet. Given that I've gone a bit left field and gone for France, I'd probably like to go with Benzema. I think he might score a few goals.
Yeah, it's interesting. It seems to be him, Neymar, or Harry Kane seems to be the favourites at the moment. So, yeah, let's wait and see. And finally, who do you think will be the star player of the tournament?
This is a tough one. I'm a big fan of the Belgian national team. I think they have some absolutely fantastic players who complement each other quite well. And having seen them a couple of times this season, obviously playing against Poland, it's hard not to plump for Kevin De Bruyne. I think I would prefer Yuri Tielemans, but Kevin De Bruyne, I think he'll probably edge it.
Well, thank you for that. That's been really awesome. But before we let you go, Ryan, more importantly, where can people find your work?
So you're able to follow me on Twitter, and that's at Ryan_Hubbard until Elon Musk gets his grabby mitts on my account and he'll probably end up leaving and going somewhere else. But you can also find some of my writing at Pilker UK. That's pilker.uk, the website. And you can also, as you mentioned, I have my book, which is From Partition to Solidarity, the first 100 years of Polish football.
Fantastic. I will make sure that's in the descriptor. So for you viewers, let us know, what do you think of this? Do you think Poland stand a chance? Give us a like, subscribe, more importantly. And thank you very much, Ryan. We'll hopefully get your thoughts as the World Cup goes by.
No problem.